Hello and welcome to this session around health and safety. Now, the idea of this is to discuss just some of the health and safety requirements we should be doing as teachers and assessors in the learning environment, and to help kind of stimulate the way that we should be thinking around learner safety. So let's start at the very beginning. Now, nobody would carry out a health and safety risk assessment if they weren't trained to do so. And therefore, you should not be given health and safety advice and guidance if you don't hold a formal health and safety qualification. So please, if you've been asked to go and do a health and safety check, make sure that you hold the appropriate qualification to do so. Equally, don't write up a risk assessment if you've not trained or you've got the appropriate qualifications. Just because you may have a level 2 certificate in health and safety does not make you an appropriate person to be identifying risk. So most health and safety advisors should have health and safety at level 4 and above. Now, let's look at how that translates. So every building should have an insurance certificate. It's our responsibility as educators to make sure that the building has those certificates in place. Now, those buildings might be public liability and professional indemnity. So there's two types of insurance certificates there. We need to make sure that our classroom is PAT tested. So the Portable Equipment Testing Act has been done and appliances are safe to use. Great. We need to make sure that the environment has adequate welfare facilities, so ventilation, light, heating, etc. We need to look at access into the building, so for example, risks, fires and lifts, etc. We need to make sure that the fire extinguishers are up to date and that they've been date checked to make sure that they're safe to use in the event of a fire. We need to be told where the fire evacuation points are and where we are or are not going to go in the case of a fire. So we have some minimal things that we really should be thinking about before we run any teaching and learning session. Again, I'm going to go back to what we've said in other videos. These are about habits. These are about teacher habits, which are obvious to be seen if you're doing them on a daily basis. We have things, if we start to move slightly side of that, around welfare facilities under health and safety. So, when are we going to have breaks? Where are the bathrooms? If people smoke, where do they go to smoke? So make sure that you're aware of all of those things. Now, that's just our teaching and learning environment. What if we were to go somewhere to carry out assessment in an unknown location? Well, hopefully, before you arrive, somebody will have already done a risk assessment, therefore telling you what may or may not be a risk. If the risk assessment isn't available, should you really be going to observe an assessment if you don't know about current risks in that environment? Now, for example, if we use health and social care, some services work with service users who are challenging and aggressive, meaning it may be okay for the assessor to be observing certain parts of practice, but an assessment could change at the drop of a hat. A patient may turn from calm to aggressive quite quickly, and therefore as an assessor you need to know where your panic rooms are, so an area where you can go to put yourself in a safe space. Now, you should know all of this information before the start of the assessment or before even going into an area where assessment should be taking place. So what we're saying is, as a teacher, it is important that you know your sector and your sector risks associated with that. Now, we normally know that this is covered in induction training and throughout all the qualifications. However, it's important that we can demonstrate that. So let's just put health and safety to one side and think about other things that could happen. We should know about fire and emergency procedures. Now, fire. We all know that we should have fire training. The reality is, are we all up to date with it? Do we really know what we should do? As teachers and as educators, it's down to us to role model those fire safety procedures. So it might be things as personal evacuation plans, if we have learners with access to assessment requirements, how we're going to get those out in the case of an emergency, and then equally where our emergency evacuation points are. That's down to us to take responsibility to make sure we know about those. Let's talk about health emergencies within our classroom setting. As a teacher and an educator, are you aware of what to do if a learner has maybe a seizure? Are you up to date with what you would do if a learner collapsed? And finally, are you up to date with what you would do if a learner needed CPR? So, are we first aid trained? Are we up to date to deal with those emergencies, especially if we're doing work-based learning and we're by ourselves? Now let's look at security. So, are we all wearing our name badges and ID badges? Do we know what an intruder looks like? Do we know how we're going to challenge those? So in our classroom environment, when we're sitting down teaching and learning, do we know who those learners are? Have we checked ID, checking them into the classroom and checking them out of the classroom? Sadly, moving on to the next subject, which unfortunately is now necessary to discuss, would we know what to do in the event of a terrorism attack? We have a duty of care as educators to protect our learners in all situations. Therefore, it is vitally important that you understand what to do in a terrorist attack. In all of the learning environments, we now have a panic room. It's a bit like a fire evacuation plan when you may move across buildings to be safe. Again, on each floor, there will be an identified panic room. In that panic room, you will have a mobile phone, blankets and water. It is important that you know how to swiftly move your learners to an area of safety and how to look after them and to protect them in the event of a terrorist attack. Please make sure you know the procedures to follow. So, let's summarise some of our roles and responsibilities. We know under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, we have a duty of care to protect our learners. But our learners also have a duty of care to protect themselves as well. It is down to us to ensure that we have read the policies and procedures for each place of assessment and at each place we assess in. It is important that we check the equipment within the room that we're using, that we understand the fire evacuation procedures, we know how to deal with a health emergency, but ultimately we would also know what to do in the case of a terrorist attack. Please make sure you know what to do. It's too late to find things out after an emergency situation. Hopefully this has given you some food for thought around your roles and responsibilities as a teacher and some of the things you should or should not be looking for when you are out conducting an assessment. And remember what I've said. Somebody that conducts the health and safety and the risk assessments and the fire assessments and the evacuation assessments should be somebody who is trained to health and safety at level 4 and above. Somebody who has a wider skill set to identify risk and look at safer ways of working. So if that's not you, please don't carry out those assessments. Be brave and say to your supervisors, I either need training or you need somebody else to conduct those checks. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I truly hope you never have to use any of those skills that you'll learn. Take care and thanks for watching.